start.
Hello. I'd like to welcome you to this segment of our documentary. In 1959, Papua New Guinea was the site of one of the most spectacular close encounter sightings of a UFO in human history. It was witnessed at close range by over 40 people, perhaps even more. Most of the major official reports were assembled by Father David Gill, an Anglican minister who witnessed the saucer event along with his parishioners hovering above about 100 meters the shore as he looked beyond and what people saw. With us today is MIRIAM NAUGHTON, one of the witnesses of this spectacular historical event. Welcome, Miriam, and so glad you could be with us this afternoon to talk about what you witnessed that many years ago. And I want to thank you very much for joining us today. Just very briefly, just give us a bit of your background. Where were you born? That kind of thing.
Yes, I was born in Sydney, 1925.
Sydney, 1925.
I had brothers and family in New Guinea, and I went there post-war with my husband.
I see.
And we settled there because I had so many relatives there that I sort of felt at home. And we settled in Port Moresby, and just above Ela Beach, and the ocean beyond, but we were sort of high up.
High up, I see.
And I had children there. I had two of my sons born there.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And,
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
yes, that's right.
Well, that's terrific. Now, about how old were you when this incident happened? It was in Port Moresby.
Yes, well, I was born in 1925, so I would have been, what, 34 or 35? Yes.
Wonderful.
At the
So
time.
you're just a young woman at the time.
Yes.
My goodness. And could you tell us where you were exactly on the night of the event?
Yes, well, you see, there were two events. There was
Okay.
1958, just shortly after that father on the mission had that cigar-shaped thing and everybody laughed about.
Mm-hmm,
So
of course.
we didn't want to say too much. And so in 1958 we saw this thing where they were actually it was still daylight, but twilight came very earlier there. So because of that, it was still light. But these men were in a boat, but they weren't supposed to be there. You see, they were inside the reef, and Europeans weren't allowed to fish inside the reef, and they were in a sort of dinghy. And they were just sitting there, but then this thing came around. There was a big radio beacon, you see, just between us and the town.
Mm-hmm.
And it sort of came around it, and then it came over inside the reef and just parked itself there. And these fellows in the dinghy, they then started flashing something at them because it was still daylight, but it was starting to, come down a little bit duskier, and they flashed down to them.
Mm-hmm.
And then in about 3 minutes, that sort of took about 3 minutes, wasn't very long, and then it shot off to the horizon, and those men then came to the shore. But by the time they got to the shore, twilight had come down.
I see.
You see, so the daylight had gone. So I don't know what got out of that dinghy. Probably it had to be men because there were men in that.
Okay. So you're telling us that around twilight there were men in a dinghy or boat in the water.
They were waiting. Yes.
They're waiting, and then the craft came over them.
Yes.
I see. What kind of communication did you sense happened between this craft and the men in the dinghy?
They were signalling. See, they were signalling up like flash, 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 and then, as I recall, and the one above, it was just lights down. But that's, I'm thinking back 50 years, so, you can just take this as something I think I saw.
Okay.
But,
could you tell us, if we could focus in on the craft that came in? You said it came around the harbor and it came and settled. Did it hover? And what did it look like?
It was a coolie hat, right, with a knob on top, a round thing on top. It was that shape,
Okay,
like so.
okay, I see.
A saucer? No, it wasn't a saucer. It was a coolie hat.
The coolie,
Yes.
it was curved?
Yes.
Was it, was it lit? Was it solid metal shape or textured looking, or was it bright light? What did it look like in its appearance?
It didn't. No, that one didn't have bright lights. It had that flashing thing, and of course then it went off. It didn't come around the harbour. It came from behind the beacon, which was on the edge of town. It was all mountainous country, you see, and came around that and then over to the
I see. Is this Port Moresby?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
right
yeah.
over Port Moresby. My
That's
goodness.
right. Yeah.
Who was with you at the time that you saw this?
Ah, yes. Well, I was on. It was a veranda. You see, close in veranda, and I was there, and I had my son, 7 years old. That was Kenneth, and my daughter, who was just under 5. They were there with me, and then there was the next one was 3-year-old Jared, and the next one was Damien, who was about 12 months old,
Goodness
sitting there
gracious.
doing this.
So you had quite the crowd. Now, did they see what you saw too?
Well, you see, they were so young, but Kenneth he saw, and my husband was hovering in the doorway behind me, you see, and I turned around to him and said, "Did you see that, Ken? You saw that, didn't you? You saw it?" And he very cautiously said, "Well, I saw something," but of course we knew what we saw, and
What was it that you think you saw?
well, I saw 2 men in a boat. Signalling something like flashlight, and this upturned coolie hat flashing back down.
What colour were the lights that flashed back down?
They were only just like our lights here.
Really?
There was
So
no colour in them.
no beam or anything? It were just lights flashing on and off on the craft?
It was just like a torch, a flashlight.
A flashlight, a torch, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's all.
Interesting. And once again, what time of day was it? You said around dusk when this began? Or-
No, it was before dusk,
Before
because dusk is very quick there.
I
you
see.
I would say it was a Saturday or a Sunday, because my husband was there, see. And I think it was only about 3:45, something
Okay.
like that.
Okay, quarter to
It
4 in the
wasn't-
afternoon.
it wasn't,
Good.
yes.
Now, some of the reports that we received from Father Gill, and reading some of his reports, he indicated that there were actual beings on the top of one of these crafts.
Yeah.
Did you see any type of beings or any type of humanoid-looking beings on the craft that you saw?
No, I only
No.
saw the men in the
Only
boat,
the men in
and
the
they
boat.
weren't us. They might have looked like us. No, I didn't see.
You didn't? Okay, well, fair enough, that's good, because some of the reports indicate that there were other things seen. Okay, now, you mentioned also, before we get into the 1959 case,
Yeah.
you mentioned also that you went to Sydney to talk to people from Project Blue Book?
No, I didn't. But on our next, well, we moved from Port Moresby back to Australia
Okay.
when the local people were going to be given the opportunity to drink, and it was Australian territory
I
they
see.
could drink.
Okay.
And we decided, because of incidents with my daughter, trying to carry her off, that sort of thing, so we thought it was time to go.
To go, I see.
For the children's sake, so we left and we bought a home in Pymble in Sydney.
I see.
And
Okay.
and it was there that the Operation Blue Book came out, and we saw what year would that be? Well, actually, we had been there some time, because my youngest son was born that year, so it would have been 1963 or 64.
So it was well after this, I
Yes,
see, when you
yes,
spoke to
yes,
these
it
people.
was. And they put out that they were having this meeting, so we decided to go and listen to what they had to say. Because we weren't mentioning anything of what we
I
saw
see.
to anyone, because we saw what happened to that poor Anglican priest.
Yes.
I mean,
yeah,
they
yeah.
crucified him.
Yeah. What's it, now, you mentioned to me earlier about Father Gill talking about this in public, and then he was criticized?
It was in the local paper,
Mhm.
and they made such fun of him and of what happened that, it wasn't. it wasn't good to
Yeah.
be involved in that.
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, in that sighting in 1958 that we had, and 1959, the paper said nothing, the radio station said nothing, nobody came forward, and it was absolute dead silence on it, because we thought there'd be a lot. You see, there was a man, he was ready to retire there, so he wouldn't be alive now. And he rented our boy house, maybe quarters, in front of the property. And the day after we saw that thing with the boat, he stopped me and he said, did you see yesterday what happened on the board? I mean, there were some men in the boat, and they were talking to something up above. I said, oh, probably weather balloon or something, and and fisheries, they do things like that.
You should have played it down.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't want to sort of say too much, because he was saying things to people were laughing at him, and I didn't want to get involved, because he said, I told all my friends about it, none of them would believe it.
Yeah. So, but in fact, when you did see what you saw, you are firmly convinced you saw something that you couldn't understand.
No, it was exactly, I drew it there, and that's exactly how we saw it. And because, I mean, you couldn't alter it or forget it. It was just something that happened to men in a boat,
Sure.
flashlights, and then the thing sped off. And that was
How
it.
fast did you perceive, did you think that thing took off?
Oh, very fast.
Very fast.
Oh yes, it reached the horizon so quickly.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah.
yes.
Let's for a moment look at the talk about the 1959
Yeah.
event which is
Yeah.
totally distinct from the one in 1958.
Oh, absolutely.
Tell us, first of all, was it on the island again, in the same place?
Yes, on Moresby. I suppose it is an island. I suppose.
Yeah,
We
that's right.
never thought of it as an
Yeah.
island. Yes, it was, and we were on the veranda.
Same place?
Same place.
Same place?
And there it was. Did the same thing, came around the radio beacon over, but it came slowly, as if it wasn't really into anything, you
I
know.
see.
And it sort of hesitated and stopped, only for, it would have been only a minute or 2 minutes in front of us, and then it went off.
I see.
And yeah,
I see. How far in front of you would you estimate it would have been?
well those Blue Book people asked me that, and because I couldn't tell them, because I don't understand distances. I mean, if you asked me how far I am from here to there, I couldn't tell you.
Oh, I see. Okay.
You know, I'm sort of artist blind about things like
That's
like
fine.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I really couldn't say. But we were on the side of the hill. Then there was our road just below our house, and then there was another road down on Ely Beach. You see, so I suppose if you thought of the start of this road, as you turn around into Lillipilly Drive, I would say we could probably be that far or a little bit further.
Probably about 100 meters or so, maybe not that far.
100 metres, what would this be?
Well, this is probably about 8 meters here. Yeah,
Yes, I would say it would
about
be.
100 meters. Good. Now, was the craft that you saw at that time in 1950, it was early 1959, correct?
Yes,
Was the
yes.
craft that you saw at that time the same or different than the one you saw to begin with in 1958?
It was same, but neither of them were very bright silver. They were grey.
They were gray, okay. Was it clearly metallic?
Yes, it was
Clearly metallic, I see.
But-
And once again, size is a difficult issue
Yeah.
here, but just estimating the size that might have been, would have been as big as a car or a bus, or just estimating?
From where I was, you know, and thinking of the difference in size, from the window over probably to those trees.
6 or 8 meters, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe more like 10 meters. That's interesting. It's a pretty good size. And it was the same sort of dome shape with the thing on top. I see.
It wasn't all that to be.
Okay. It's really interesting that you talk about the size of it, because did it move out the same way as it did in '58, or was it slower in taking itself away from that?
That's right.
Very fast, eh?
And in the same direction.
In the same direction.
On the horizon, across.
Across that way, and it just shot out. I see, I see.
Yeah.
Who were you with at that time? Was just
Yeah,
59? Same.
The children.
The children, okay.
Yeah, and where was Ken? No, Ken was, that's the one that Ken wasn't at that other one, I'm sorry. He was at this one,
At this one, I see.
behind us in the door.
Oh, I saw the second sighting.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
because that's why we were saying to him, did you see that? See that, Ken? Did you see it? Did you see it?
Yeah.
And, I saw something.
Now, did you have the same, when you saw it the second time, did you have any kind of different feelings about it? Or was it or similar, or here it comes back again, or what feeling were you having when you saw it the second time?
Well, I just, I didn't really think anything, because I had seen that first one, and this one was so much simpler, yet more interesting to me.
Oh, I see.
You
Okay.
see, so.
Now, about Father Gill, you did not know Father Gill at the time, did you? Okay.
I haven't met him
That's
either.
right. Okay. However, there were, in some of the research that we have, a lot of sightings in that time frame.
Yeah.
And a lot of people were talking about it amongst themselves. Did you ever talk to other people about this, or did you keep it
Well, you
yourself?
see, the funny thing was, the paper made a big deal about
They did.
that, you
Okay.
see, and sort of ridiculed it in a way. They made fun of it.
Of course, yeah.
Right, as if they had been, I always thought later that they had been told to make fun of it.
I see.
Because they reported it, and the radio reported it, but with the sighting, the second one with us, silence. Not a word
Not
from
a word.
anyone. Nobody saw it, we saw it, and they had to see it, because it came around the beacon out onto the bay. I mean, how many people? There were about 2,000 people lived around there, because there were about 5,000 or 6,000 Westerners on, in Papua New
Of course.
Guinea. And they had to see it.
Had to see that.
And I thought later that people sort of rang the radio station, rang the newspaper, and that was it. And they didn't get involved, but they told,
Yeah, I
and
see.
it was claimed of.
Right.
That's what I thought.
I see.
I could
No.
be wrong.
Well, you were the witness, so you saw what you saw. There's not much
Yeah,
doubt.
I did,
Yeah.
but then why didn't those other people say anything? Nobody discussed anything.
Yeah. Could be for the same reasons. They just feared the ridicule. Yeah.
They could have been, in the Post and the radio station, I thought were probably told to shut up.
Of course. Yeah.
And because they thought they ridiculed it enough with the Anglican priest, and that they did that, I thought, deliberately. And then after that, I thought that,
You felt that they deliberately ridiculed Father Gill?
I think so.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, that's my take on it. And they thought they killed it. So with the ones afterwards, they just ignored it.
I see.
You see.
If you were to make a statement to either a media person, a radio station, or someone in government about this kind of incident that you saw, what would you say to them?
You mean after all this time? Well, what I would say to them is, why did we have flying saucers there at that time, and why after all this time are you at last bringing it to people's notice?
I see.
You
Do you think it's about time that they should do it?
I've got to think about that.
Not an easy question, is it?
No, it's not easy after. It's been so long, you see, and I think to myself, why would they? Why would they after all this
What
time?
benefit? Yeah. How are you feeling about all of this many years later?
Well, I thought of it over the years. I never really forgot it. I never really forgot it, and but I believed I didn't disbelieve like other people because I knew what I saw. So I would just accept it as having happened, being there, and you know, so what? They're not worrying us, we're not worrying them, so leave it.
Just leave it alone.
Yeah.
Well, that's terrific. I really think that you've added a lot to this particular segment of the sighting in Papua New Guinea.
Yes.
You brought a different context to it. I know Father Gill was an important factor in all of this. Now, do you know of any other people who may have had, other than your family that was on the port, do you know of any other people that may have witnessed something similar?
Only the man who rented our boy house, he saw me the next day after the men in the boat. But he'd be dead now because he was in his 60s then, and we're looking at 50 years ago.
50 years ago. Just for 1 second, can I just go back to the men in the boat? You said there were 4 men in the boat?
No, 2.
2 men in the boat, okay. There were 2 men in the boat and they were just there, and then they noticed this craft and they started...
No, they were waiting for it.
They were waiting for it. Now that's intriguing.
They were there. See, they went out in that boat and they were just sitting in it. We noticed if they had been on a native laboratory, we wouldn't have noticed them because they had permission to always fish in inside the reef. But those were Europeans, and that of course drew my eyes to them because they were just sitting there.
And what gave you the impression that they were waiting for this craft?
Well, because the boat, their dinghy wasn't moving. It was just there in that one spot, and it was just staying in that one spot.
So when the craft did come over, was it like they were expecting this to be there, and then you'd say so?
Oh, they were waiting for it, I'm sure.
Oh, that is fascinating, Miriam. That really, really surprises me.
Oh, yes. No, they were there for the purpose of communicating with that thing above them, and definitely because they were there waiting, and when it came over, and it sort of hovered there, and they were ready. They had their lights ready, and they started.
My goodness. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. It might seem a little strange, but are you sure it was a boat that they were waiting in, or was it some other kind of craft?
It was, to my, I mean, it's like a rowing boat, you know.
Oh, okay. It was visibly a rowing boat. Okay.
Yes, that shape.
I see. Okay. Now, I thought perhaps it might have been another kind of craft, but
no.
It was a terrestrial. There were men that were waiting there. Who signaled first?
They did.
The men in the boat? They did.
Yeah, they did, and they got answered.
And they got answered.
Yeah. But they were definitely waiting there. It was pre-arranged because they didn't move. They just stayed in that one spot and waited. And that's what drew our eyes, because we were watching them sitting in their boat, you know, and doing nothing. Otherwise we wouldn't have noticed, you know, if it had been a laboratory, we wouldn't have seen
So there's clearly some kind of communication going on between the rowboat and the men in the boat and this craft.
Yeah. That's why they were there, you could tell. And when that one went off, they came back.
You seem very, very convinced about the fact that they were waiting, and that really intrigues me.
Well, they were still. You see, they didn't move. They just sat there, and nothing moved. And it was still very light. The twilight up there is very fast, you know, like that when it's dark. And that's why when that boat came to shore, I'm sure they pulled the boat ashore, but I wouldn't have known. I wouldn't have known. But
where did the men go after that? Did you see where you don't know?
No, it was dark.
It was dark, because you didn't see where they went. I see.
By then, and it was starting twilight when they were on their way back, and by the time they got to shore, it was so fast, the darkness there. But I know they must have got out of that boat. They must have done something. They weren't sitting there.
Yeah, I would love to have spoken to one of those men. That would have been absolutely
I had no intention whatsoever, of going down seeing what came off that boat. Because to my way of thinking, that they must have been everyone knew everyone else up there.
Yeah.
And there must have been probably someone we knew. And here they were, just like us.
Very, very strange sighting indeed.
Yeah,
very strange. Well, Miriam, thank you very, very much for joining us today. I really, really appreciate it. I know that many people that will listen to this testimony will in fact be intrigued by your testimony, by your documentation of clearly one of the more fascinating cases of UFOs that we've experienced.
Well, I hope not too many people in Australia see it, because you know, they'll be saying, "Oh, how did that happen?" Because I haven't mentioned it over the years. So.
Well, I kind of sense that you're brave enough to withstand any kind of criticism that you might receive. I think you're a very brave woman.
Oh, I hope
First
so.
of all,
Well,
yeah.
I'm interested now to see what they do with that information.
Yeah,
Really, I mean, because it's been so long, and for it to come back after all that time, there must be a reason.
there must be a reason for it. Yeah.
And I only hope they never find us and come down to us, because we'll never be. I'm convinced of that.
That'll be something very challenging for the human race.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you very, very much, and it's been wonderful speaking with you, and best wish to you in your future.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
And you too.
Okay.